Story 1. Robin Williams had a profound impact on my life. I experienced severe depression in college, and his movies always helped me through my darkest days. Mrs. Doubtfire was my comfort film. When I heard the news, I sat in my car during my lunch break and cried. It still hurts to think about it. Story 2. Terry Pratchett, the English author, was known to be dying, but it still hurt when he passed. No more wonderful stories. Story 3. Princess Diana. I was only 12, but I remember my mother waking me up crying. She had all these magazines with Diana's pictures, and we sat on the couch watching the news coverage together. It still feels surreal to think about it. Story 4. The way Gene Hackman went was terrible. One can only hope that he may not have realized the extent of it, but it must have still been brutal. Story 5. Keith Flint, the lead singer of The Prodigy, played a vital role in the band's identity. Although the group continues to perform without him, it is unfortunately not the same. His passing felt like the end of an era for The Prodigy. Story 6. The one I miss the most is Michael Clark Duncan. I also love John Ritter and enjoyed 8 Simple Rules when I was a kid. Story 7. Dave Bowie and Prince in the same unfortunate year was a major blow. There were others in that year as well. Story 8. Alan Rickman seemed like the best of men and was an incredible actor. I cried upon hearing he had passed, and again while watching him in the first film I saw him in Truly Madly Deeply. Story 9. Norm Macdonald was my favorite comedian. He was very discreet about his illness and faced it with such dignity that it added another layer of heartbreak. Story 10. Not a huge celebrity, but Michael Thalasitis. His death forced me to confront how severe my trauma was and how I needed to seek help. Story 11. Matthew Perry finally confronted his demons and began a new, almost happy life, but ultimately passed away. It is very sad and unfair. Story 12. Amy Winehouse experienced a challenging mental health crisis that was devastating. I was just a bit older than she was. Story 13. You cannot convince me the world's collective smile did not get a little sadder when Robin Williams died. I am not crazy about celebrities, but I think he genuinely enjoyed making people smile. Story 14. Philip Seymour Hoffman was striking in his talent, which often went to waste. It reminded me of just how skilled he was at portraying depressed and internally tortured characters. The sad thing is, he excelled in these roles because that mirrored his own struggles. Story 15. Michael Jackson was a kind and empathetic person who believed in the power of kindness, gentleness, and loving one another without judgment. His presence would be impactful in today's world. Story 16. Scott Weiland. I loved Stone Temple Pilots since I was a child. They were one of the first bands I truly enjoyed. But that's not the main point. I woke up, went into the bathroom, checked my phone, sat down and cried. My hat was in my hands. My wife asked what was wrong when I eventually came out. At that time, she was struggling with a severe alcohol addiction. The rapid onset and psychosis were more common in women. It was reading that headline that made me, who had been her biggest supporter at great cost, realize in my heart that she wasn't going to make it. So there I was, crying over my rock stars. She passed away 2 months later. My current wife is asleep next to me. Her nose is congested, causing her to make bird-like sounds. I have woken her up several times, laughing. I find myself laughing a lot more with her around. Can't rain all the time. Story 17, many of those mentioned, but for some unknown reason, Chester Bennington. I think it is because the song Numb got me through some bad times, as well as the lyrics of One More Light. Who cares if one more light goes out? In the sky of a million stars, it flickers, flickers. Who cares when someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. Story 18, George Foreman recently. What a humble soul. I didn't expect him to go this early. He seemed so fine. I wanted to meet him someday and have a long chat. He was the closest to Muhammad Ali I could get, and I thought I had time. But someday in paradise, George, grace me. Story 19, George Carlin. I listened to his material before I was a teenager. But it wasn't until years later that I truly understood how skilled he was at using language to educate and entertain simultaneously. Very few entertainers, especially comedians, can make such a significant career change midstream and continue to achieve great success. Story 20. Andy Rourke, the bassist in The Smiths, is my favorite bassist, and I had no idea he had been ill at all. I dreamed of meeting him someday to tell him how much his playing had inspired and thrilled me as a bassist myself, but he died way too young. I cried on and off all day while trying to get my work done. I hadn't anticipated being so upset. Story 21. Douglas Adams. There is much more madness to explain in his own special way. He was not a prolific author, but every word he wrote was valuable. Story 22. Philip Seymour Hoffman. I was upset when Scott Weiland died, which caused me to arrive at work late. Story 23. Eddie Guerrero. I guess because we were both from El Paso and some of my family grew up with his family. I never had the pleasure of meeting any of the Guerreros, but Eddie always reminds me of some of my uncles. Story 24. I wouldn't say he's really a celebrity, but Florian Schneider of Kraftwerk is an influential figure. I was actually listening to Trans-Europe Express when I browsed the comment section and found several new comments saying, "Rest in peace, Florian." I know he was 73 and had been out of Kraftwerk for years, but I couldn't believe it at first. I looked up to him. I needed a double take, so I went on Twitter to see if anything came up. Sure enough, Florian was trending, and there was an article in Rolling Stone about his death. At that point, I knew he was really gone, and I sobbed. I was upset for weeks and binge-listened to the entire Kraftwerk discography for months. Story 25. Mr. Rogers was so wholesome. It feels like he was a real next-door neighbor, even though he was in his little TV world. It was also sad to lose John Ritter and Robin Williams. Story 26. Ronnie James Dio passing away on the same day as my birthday really bummed me out. I am truly glad I got to see him with heaven and hell. Rest in peace, you legend. Story 27. Chris Farley was a significant loss. I remember it very well because he passed away the day before my birthday, and I felt really sad. Story 28. I remember my dad was very sad when Lady Diana passed away. As for me, I was just a boy, but the death of the greatest rapper, Tupac, still hurts today. Story 29. Andre Matos was the first singer of Ungra. I listened to his voice throughout my teenage and early adult years, and his sudden death felt like losing a beloved relative. Story 30. Julian Sands went missing while hiking in the mountains near Los Angeles and was not found for 5 months. It was not a great shock, but it was a deep sadness. He was one of those British actors who always elevated the quality of projects he was involved in. Story 31. Anthony Bourdain, Alan Rickman, Matthew Perry, Chester Bennington, Jackie Collins, Liam Payne, Robbie Coltrane, Dame Maggie Smith. Story 32. Maya Angelou. I cried. Her writing truly touched my heart, and her voice felt like a warm, soul-restoring hug. Story 33. Chester Bennington, without a doubt, moved me deeply. I cried when I heard Lost for the first time, which was released years after his death. Story 34. Cheater, Anthony, and Robin. I have struggled with depression for as long as I can remember. It hurts to know that they suffered so profoundly they couldn't continue. I am not offended by their actions. Rather, I can relate in a limited way and wish they were still here because they were good, kind human beings. Story 35. Kobe, especially because his daughter and other children died in one of the worst possible ways. No one deserves that. Story 36. Chester Bennington. Linkin Park's music has helped me immensely, and I have always loved Chester's voice. The lyrics resonate deeply with me and speak to my personal experiences. I also had the opportunity to see them in concert, and they were incredible, leaving me with lasting memories. When Chester passed away, it felt as though I lost a therapist. Story 37. I have never really been deeply affected by a celebrity death. However, the passing of Bill Paxton, Eddie Van Halen, and Val Kilmer impacted me significantly. Story 38. George Foreman. I have many memories of watching him fight with my father. I realized that as you grow older, all your heroes pass away. Story 39, Cameron Boyce. I grew up watching him on the Disney Channel, and finding out he died in his sleep at only 20 years old was devastating. Epilepsy is a truly difficult condition. Story 40. As a graphic designer and someone passionate about fashion, Virgil Abloh's death was truly tragic. He was a creative force in multiple areas and was at the peak of his career, not to mention being a father and husband. He epitomized the principle of helping others succeed. He created a comprehensive website on how to use Adobe software, obtain trademarks, and build websites, among other resources. He had so much more to offer. Story 41. Chris Farley is an incredible performer. He was the first person to ever make me laugh, truly laugh, where you can't catch your breath. When everyone asks what is so funny, you can't get the words out. Story 42. I wouldn't say I was upset, but Ryan Dunn was one of my favorite members of Jackass. I must say, Jackass 4 just wasn't the same without him. Story 43. It was a strange experience, but when Dimebag Darrell from Pantera was murdered on stage, I was genuinely in shock. I used to watch the tour videos, but my whole relationship with the band and their music changed. I can't listen to them today because it makes me sad. Story 44. A couple of years ago, Bray Wyatt, a WWE wrestler, passed away. I was a huge wrestling fan until 2007 when Benoit murdered his family. I didn't watch again until 2015. I met Jake the Snake and thought to myself, I wonder what is happening in WWE lately. So I tuned in to the next episode. I saw John Cena in a cage while a children's choir sang to him, accompanied by a strange man in a rocking chair who led the song. It was captivating, and that peculiar figure drew me back into the product with his cult, the Wyatt family. I wouldn't miss an episode again until 2019. It was, and still is, a significant part of my life, and I'm grateful that Bray Wyatt brought me back into that world. Bray Wyatt unexpectedly passed away in 2023. It was the one time I cried over a celebrity's death. Story 45. Naomi Judd suffered from mental health issues for years, but seemed to be coping, even though it was difficult. Her journey gave me hope as someone with similar struggles. Her passing was a shocking loss. Story 46. Amy Winehouse, I shed a few tears. I had been a huge fan since the early days of her career and loved her music. It was just so sad as she seemed to be on the cusp of conquering her demons. Story 47. Bowie and Lynch did what they needed to, but it still didn't stop me from crying. Anyone who dies before 70 is just too young. Story 48. Corey Monteith. I would love to rewatch Glee, but it would be too sad. Matthew Perry. Gone too soon. Both seemed like wonderful people too. Drugs are harmful. Story 49. I would have loved to see Rick Mayall and Ade Edmondson perform in a Bottom show, but I can't now because he's entertaining everyone in heaven. Story 50. Anton Yelchin. Oh man, I think he was just beginning to be recognized for his talent when he died. I had just been saying to a friend that this Anton Yelchin guy is really talented. Does anyone else see that? I was thinking, wow, he has it. He's probably going to be really famous. His family were survivors of Stalin and the Soviet Union. He had the backstory, the genuineness, the talent, the experience as a child actor, and he was attractive. Then all of a sudden, he just passed away in a freak accident at age 27, in one of the most horrific ways possible. Story 51, Michelle Trachtenberg. She has been out of the limelight for a while, but I think just growing up in the 90s and seeing her on children's shows, then in Eurotrip when I was a teenager, feels like she grew up with my generation and left us too soon. She also has very little drama surrounding her, which is always a plus. Rest in peace. Story 52, Gordon Lightfoot. I live in Australia now, and whenever I mention that he has died, people in my circle say, "Who?" Story 53, Robin Williams impacted me deeply. I cried for hours. What made it so poignant is that I have always been open about my mental health, and many people reached out to me asking if I was okay. It highlighted just how severe depression can be. Some people were concerned, thinking I might be next. I still cannot watch his films without sobbing. Story 54. Sinead O'Connor and Dolores O'Riordan. We lost two of the most beautiful female voices within 5 years of each other. I cried. Story 55. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers have been one of my favorite bands for as long as I can remember. One of the most memorable tantrums I threw as a toddler was because my mom couldn't take us to one of their concerts. I tried many times to attend a show, but something always came up, and now I never can. Story 56. Meat Loaf had controversial opinions, and I disagreed with much of what he believed. However, the world feels quieter and less dramatic without him. Story 57. Michael Jackson. I was at a big metal festival when the news came out, and even there, it was the talk of the day. Story 58. I have a few. Robin Williams. I had the pleasure of meeting him as a tour guide for VIPs at Disney. Truly broke my heart to hear of his death. My own father died in a similar way, which affected me deeply. Others. Carrie Fisher, Stan Lee, and Robbie Coltrane. Story 59. Liam Payne. It has been nearly 6 months and I am still not over it. I remember where I was when I received the text from my mom. My heart sank when I read the message. I immediately went to Google, and there it was. Liam Payne dead at 31. Growing up, I was a huge One Direction fan. I never got to see them live, so I was hoping to see all 5 members at a reunion show, maybe in another lifetime. Story 60. Robin Williams. I was depressed and grieved for weeks. I still feel sad on the anniversary of his death. It shattered me that someone so talented, who brought so much joy to others, could be so profoundly unhappy. I am still angry that, with all the advancements in medicine, nobody could help him. Story 61. Kobe Bryant was an incredible player, and it is unfortunate that many people did not fully appreciate the impact he had on the game of basketball until after his death. Story 62. Sonny Bono. I know it sounds unusual, but he was a hero of sorts when a group I was chaperoning was involved in an accident with several casualties. He stayed and helped us for over 12 hours. Story 63. Philip Seymour Hoffman and Heath Ledger. I tend not to be bothered by celebrity deaths because I don't know them as individuals, but with those two, they had immense talent and so much more to give to cinema that it was a genuine loss for everyone. Story 64. I'm still fairly young, but I know when Paul McCartney passes, I will be distraught and possibly reckless. Story 65. Leslie Jordan was such a ray of sunshine in my social feed. I still feel a little emotional thinking about him. Story 66. Neil Peart's story of losing his wife and daughter, and his subsequent path to healing, is truly inspiring. Story 67. I have never been very upset about celebrities dying, but the one I was most upset about was probably Bob Saget. Story 68. Amy Winehouse. The documentary about her life and death was very touching, highlighting the direct connection between each song she wrote and the disintegration of her life. Story 69. Lance Reddick was disappointing for me and the Destiny community. The character he voiced in the game delivered a eulogy for a fallen friend shortly after his passing. It was depressingly surreal. Story 70. Jimmy Buffett. I was outside dropping someone off when I heard him singing at his last concert. I now wish I had gone in. Rest in peace, Jimmy. Story 71. They are not family or anything close, just complete strangers except for their fame, which is manufactured for public consumption. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.